Hi, this is Corncod1 of Nationalist News and Notes, and Paleoconservative on Steroids, which is my podcast. I was hoping that a re-election of Donald Trump would give nationalists a 4-year period where they could effectively organize to eventually grab the reins of power sometime in the relatively near future. It looks as if it's heading in the direction that we're not going to get that 4-year breathing space. One positive thing about it is that, well, Mr. Trump really did win the election, but it was taken from him by criminal acts of Democratic governors in cahoots with leftist media to essentially perform a coup in the United States of America with, of course, the aid of the CIA and the FBI. As I've often said in many venues, I saw Donald Trump as a transition figure, not as our savior, so to speak. So while it's discouraging and it makes our plans more difficult, it's not a complete loss. Of course, the biggest problem is that as soon as he's sworn in as President of the United States, he's going to open that southern border, and multiple millions of Mexicans will come into the United States illegally, and somehow he'll find a way to make them all citizens. And of course 80% of them will vote for the Democratic Party, which is a neo-Marxist organization at this point. And so that's a big disadvantage that we're working under. But we have I think we have some possible avenues of growth in the United States. As this new government takes over, we're going to see a lot of anti-white racism on the part of that government. And so I think a lot of people will begin to change their mind about things as persons of European heritage have become and will be becoming objects of hatred and derision in this country. And people will feel it very directly this time around. This is not something they're doing on the QT. I also think that there may be a war amongst leftists. You know, they're like a bunch of piranhas. When they get into a feeding frenzy, they begin to eat themselves up, because they're essentially hate-filled, irrational human beings. Barely human in any real sense, because they have no sense of humanity or morals. So we've got to stay the course and try to move things in a proper direction after this coup. Everybody understands that this upcoming government, which is likely to take over on January 20th, is an illegitimate government, and this will propel, I hope, people who are moderate leftists, Republicans, and other people. I mean, gosh, no less a globalist than Lindsey Graham, while for some reason, all the other Republican politicians in the country have kept their mouths shut while the presidential election was taken away from a Republican, and no one said anything. one notable person is Asa Hutchinson, the governor of Arkansas, who's kept his mouth shut because he's an establishment tool. So we must keep fighting on. We should talk about changes of tactics. Countercurrents magazine, an online publication, saw things pretty much the way I did, is that we'd be given a little bit more time to organize during a Trump administration because we'd have freedom of speech. In a couple of years from now, we may not have freedom of speech after a packed Supreme Court, will gut our First Amendment rights as well as our Second Amendment rights. But nationalists have to be ready to strike and take advantage of situations because they're going to bring our enemies, the American neo-Marxist left, are undoubtedly going to make mistakes. And it's our job to take advantage of them. They love talking about democracy. Well, they just undermined democracy over the past few days, and we know that I think we always knew this, but a lot of the American people didn't. Now we know they don't believe in Republican government. So the American people will gradually come to the conclusion that all this talk of republicanism and democracy on the part of Democrats is pure hokum. This is Corncod One of Nationalist News and Notes and Paleo Conservative on Steroids, signing off.